Well, welcome to Virtual Midtown Reader. I'm Whitney, bookseller at Midtown Reader and fan of Diane Roberts and student of Diane Roberts. And tonight we are going to listen to Diane talk to us. So if you don't know, Diane is a journalist and a professor of English at Florida State University. Her most recent book is Tribal: College Football in the Secret Heart of America. And we're just very grateful to get to spend a little quarantine with her. Diane's going to talk to us for like 20 minutes or so. I don't really know about what, but I'm so excited to find out.
Big books. I'm going to talk to you about big books you can read that will take a lot of time and take you away from the nightmare that is either, self-isolating, quarantining, queuing at Trader Joe's 6 feet away and being terrified, or much worse, watching any of the news on the TV. Please, God, none of you have tried a shot of Clorox today. That wouldn't be good. But then again, people that might do that don't read books, so that ain't y'all. But I was thinking about this in terms of what books can you go back to, what books will keep you going for a while. And of course, I am an English professor, so I have loads of those. My top of my list, other than that, none of these are in order of preference. Just, I think everybody should read Moby Dick. And I know that makes many of your hearts sink down through the subflooring, but Moby Dick really is a book about America. It's not about a whale. You just think it's about a whale because you tried to read it in high school and you thought, this book sucks. If you read it very, very slowly, especially in the beginning, you'll find out it's about how to renew the Republic. It doesn't work in Moby Dick, but it sort of gives us a roadmap for renewing the Republic in a very, what I put this, kind of multicultural, multiracial, loving, weird kind of way. Melville was a very weird fellow, and Moby Dick is a very weird book. But if you give it time, if you go slowly, you will just find everything in there. In the first 10 chapters of Moby Dick, you've got a guy giving you probably a false name. You've got him being depressed, telling you he's depressed and possibly suicidal. He needs to go to sea. He wanders into a black church service and contemplates the blackness of blackness. There's all this stuff in the novel that is, by the way, I'm sorry, here's a cat. This is Hugo. He resembles a white whale or a black and white whale. But anyway, he's a show cat in his mind. But you will see all this stuff about energy in there. Remember, whales were energy back in the day. And whales were considered renewables. And I mean, it's a book that really takes us on for today. And if you go through it with some care, I think you'll find it extremely funny, wonderfully weird, and you might even get excited about it. And then you'll be cured of that feeling you had when your teacher tried to make you read it and you're just like, man, I don't care how long a whale is. I don't care what he weighs. I don't care what he eats. Shut up. So there's one big book. And I don't have my copy of that one. I have other books I'm going to hold up here. Here's a famous book. This is Homer's The Odyssey. This is a newish translation by Emily Watson, and it is absolutely the best thing. Emily Watson is a young classic scholar. She reads Homer, whoever it was. We call him Homer now. But she reads the Greek of Homer, the poet or poets who made this story, and sees that there's much more humor and much more, I should say, women-centered narrative to the Odyssey than the old translators, who of course were a bunch of white dudes. They were white, mostly white British dudes. She is a white British woman, and she really brings out Penelope and the goddesses, and you'll like Circe more than you did and you'll laugh at Odysseus. It is a cracking translation, and you will read it like a novel. It's not hard. It's kind of like Moby Dick. You got to give it a chance, get into it. It's not, off-putting because it's a classic. We get scared of those. So, speaking of classics, this is, I think we may even have, may well have the editors of this volume here, but I picked this one out before I knew they were hanging out. Check this out, The Big Book of Classic Fantasy, edited by our own Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. This book will just keep you going and going and going. And when they say big, they ain't kidding. This is a very, very, very big book. And it ranges across the world, across the centuries. It is so much fun. Writers from Mary Shelley, Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein, to some writers you might not think of as fantasy writers. W.E.B. Du Bois, for example. Probably didn't put him in here. Zora Neale Hurston, Florida writer. Lord Dunsany, Irish fantasist. All kinds of terrific stuff. This is the kind of book that you can pick up, open at random, find the beginning of the piece, open at random, read a piece. You don't have to read them in order. Just read something. It will expand your mind. It will expand, fire new pathways through your little neural whatnot, network, I believe is what we call it. But I really love this book, and I love a book that you can just open up, like I just opened to Jules Verne's Master Zacharias, or let's see, The News by Nikolai Gogol. Sorry, The Nose, not The News, God. The light's going bad in here and I can't see. But there's something wonderful about a great big book that it's sort of like a feast that lasts for days. You're not going to get worn out with it. And you can go back and be delighted all over again. And here's another big old book. And there are two more that go with this one, including a brand new one, which I think they'll have at Midtown Reader for you to order. Wolf Hall, Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall. There are 3 books in this series. It's a trilogy. It is about the guy who was Henry VIII's fixer. And he's a guy we've never thought much about, other than there's a portrait of him by Holbein, and he wasn't real pretty. Apparently, the kind of a bulby nose and, scruffy looking guy, but very clever and very much a manipulator in the court of Henry VIII, which took some doing because Henry VIII himself was a master manipulator. This book is simultaneously historically so true to the 16th century and yet incredibly contemporary sounding. I have no idea how Hilary Mantel does this, but if you want to learn everything about the Tudors and the court of Henry VIII and just what a ruthless, nasty, politically charged sort of cesspit full of people who dressed beautifully and wrote poetry. Seriously, they were cultivated. They were just also pretty damn ruthless characters. So, you can have 3 books will keep you going, and you'll just live there in 16th century London, reveling in the sheer nastiness and the political maneuvering that goes on. And if you are inclined to think even more deeply about the screwed upness of the contemporary American landscape, both political, let's go for all of it, political, moral, historical, social. Another Tallahassee-based writer, Bob Shakochis, The Woman Who Lost Her Soul. This book has spies. It has, colonialism. It has anti-colonialism. It has a great deal of intrigue and lying, and tells you about American foreign policy over, say, the last 50 years, as well as tells you about real people. There are things that are sort of like love stories, but not in any kind of traditional sense. And the language of this book, this is where I'd go back again to Moby Dick. Moby Dick's language is exquisite and weird, and Bob Shikochis' sentences are exquisite and weird. You could just savor his sentences over and over again. They are built like exquisite pieces of jewelry. You know, you can look at every gem placed in those sentences, and you know, he hasn't put the pearl in the wrong place, and he's got the emerald just where it should be. They are glorious. He's a writer who isn't afraid, shall we say, of the long sentence. And I read a lot of Faulkner, so that doesn't bother me. If a long sentence makes you nervous, that's probably not a book for you. And then a different kind of exquisite writing, and a book which, if you're not angry enough yet about what we're doing to our environment and how we are destroying what should be the most precious things to us, it's especially relevant again for Tallahassee. Richard Powers is The Overstory. The Overstory is about trees. And I have seen people go, "You're kidding. It's a novel about trees." Well, it's about people too, but it's about trees communicating, trees which are huge habitats in and of themselves, trees which speak somehow, communicate somehow through their roots or their leaves, trees in whose canopies is a whole world that we can't see, and that we can't know. We always think we can see everything and know everything. Well, we can't. And this is an astonishing book, The Overstory. It won the Pulitzer Prize last year, Pulitzer for Fiction, exquisitely written, available in paperback. And, you know, it's the kind of book, I got lost in it and I didn't want it to end. So I kept jumping back 3 chapters and rereading while I was reading the first time, which is a little odd because usually I read the whole thing, then I reread it if I like it that much. But I just sort of couldn't bear for it to get to the end. It is so splendid and so immersive and sort of magic realist, but not in a way that makes you grumpy about it if you like your things scientifically realistic. It's also a very scientifically accurate book about what trees do and how they are, and how a tree is a whole universe. Any tree is a whole universe. This is it's focused on a particular tree, but also all of its incumbent trees. And I'll just say to you, because I'm told that I should do this more than I do, I don't think we're going to have football this year. I really don't. Which to some of us, this is sad and depressing. But you can always read The Snark About the Football by me. It's short, so this one doesn't really count. Okay, that's my commercial. But I'd be really happy to have questions from y'all, or suggestions from you, because obviously this is the tiniest little bit of all the wonderful books you might read that are large and meaty or portobello mushroom kind of meaty if you're a vegetarian. I'm gonna let Tiffany's the ringmaster here. I mean, Whitney, God. I haven't had a lot of sleep, and I was just on the phone to one of my graduate students who's called Tiffany. So Whitney, just reach through the screen and punch me. Okay. Like I don't know your name.
I'm just gonna talk through the screen. So if you guys have any questions you want to ask Diane, go down to the bottom of your screen and hit chat, and you can chat me your questions and I'll feed them to her as we continue for the next few minutes.
And I'll even answer questions like, what the hell is wrong with you? I mean, that's a legitimate question. when it's directed at me.
One of our readers says The Gulf by Jack Davis is a great big book.
Oh yes, and a wonderful book. Another Pulitzer winner, Jack Davis, who was here either last year or the year before at Word of South. He's a great historian, and that book will tell you every single thing about the Gulf of Mexico. And you should want to know about the Gulf of Mexico, because at the rate we're going, it will soon be closer to where you're living here in Tallahassee. Not that soon, I exaggerate, but
So
go ahead.
Liz Jamieson recommends A Gentleman in Moscow.
Oh yes, haven't read that one myself, but I've heard it's great.
Somebody wants to know what you're going to miss most about football.
Oh God, I think the ritual that I know what I'm doing every Saturday, that I get up and I start fretting about this stupid, violent, indefensible game that I'm nevertheless addicted to. And maybe I won't miss it. Maybe that would be the great thing. I've been waiting for years to get over football somehow. Mm-hmm. I've been hoping, I thought for a while that living 10 years in England would cure me, and it didn't. Maybe this will cure me. I don't know. But I just can't imagine 80,000 people sitting in a stadium on top of each other. Can y'all? I mean, unless they're all tested going in, which I don't think that's going to happen. We can't test enough people in Florida. We can't test the healthcare workers in Florida now. We can't test the doctors. We can't test in nursing homes yet. No, it's absolutely extraordinary that we can't manage this basic fundamental thing. So I think football will quite rightly be very low down on the list of things that we should be fretting over in the fall. And like I said, it'll only be people with a deep inner barbarian like me that'll be like, man, we should have been playing Clemson this weekend. I dare say I'll live through it.
So Ann Vandermeer wants you to recommend a funny book.
Oh, okay. Funny book. I think Paul Beatty's The Sellout is one of the funniest books I've ever read. Like, it was so funny, I had to put my head down on the table and laugh. And God, it won an award too, and maybe it won the Booker Prize. All these terrific books. It's if you're a bit squeamish about racial satire, it's probably not the book for you. But it is exceedingly funny and dark and bitter. And if you want maybe a slightly gentler but also very funny book, Harrison Scott Key's The Largest Man in the World, which is this sort of cracked memoir about a Southern white boy growing up in the shadow of a really domineering daddy. And it is extremely funny. He too had visited for Word of South, and his reading had people weeping with laughter.
Awesome, thank you. So a couple of people asked about nonfiction. Any memoirs by women or nonfiction books you've read?
Well, there's so many good ones. So many good ones. I will read anything by Rebecca Solnit. I think she's just brilliant. And A Field Guide to Getting Lost is a really terrific one. I just love the way she writes about, well, something ordinary like taking a walk, and then it turns into a lesson on how the color blue in painting evolved and where we got the kinds of blue that they used in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance, and why it was significant. And I'll just tell you that it was significant because it was one of the hundreds and thousands of examples of globalization long before we thought there was globalization, because the blue, the sort of blue, the color in all those paintings of the Virgin Mary's robe is lapis lazuli, and it came from Afghanistan. So how, you know, it got from Afghanistan to Venice and Venice to medieval France. And this is just in a little essay about Rebecca Solnit walking around in Utah. I think she's terrific. Memoirs, I tend to like, I'm funny about memoirs in that I don't like most of them because most people don't have lives that fascinate me or that compel me. Characters in fiction compel me more than real people, unless they're just incredible. So I'd rather read David Sedaris's semi-memoirs, his essays about his family or his slightly supercharged version of his family. He's very funny. Um, he's he admits that he sort of pumps up the family a bit. That's okay. Um, it isn't journalism. No one's life depends on whether David Sedaris' sister had 6 Barbie dolls or 5 Barbie dolls.
Right.
But I would also recommend, if you need, if you're feeling sluggish and you need to up your anger quotient, one of the many excellent books by, say, you could pick one of Rick Wilson's books, Everything Trump Touches Dies, if you need to get riled up. If you want to get more riled up, you can read one of the newer Trump ones, one by Jonathan Karl. I can never remember titles. And they will, if you need that extra motivation to ask for your mail-in ballot, which you can do from the Leon County Election Supervisor right now. And the earlier you can vote, the better, because they're going to have to count a lot of votes that come in by mail. They'll get you going. They'll get you going. And they're fun to read. And anyway, I'll probably have a better answer for that in 10 minutes when it's too late.
Right. I've got a good little comment here.
Yeah.
Someone says a fantastic companion to Overstory is Robert McFarlane's Underland.
Yes.
Kind of
Robert McFarlane, if you haven't read him, get anything by him. Anything. He is a superb writer. He is a Cambridge history don, of all things. But what he likes to do is take himself off to find things. So he decides in one book, well, how much of Britain is still wild? And it looks like none is still wild, but he finds these incredible wild places. Or he goes looking for old roadways, old trails, old pathways. When I say old, I mean anything from 200 years old to 3,000 years old. And while he's doing this, he's sleeping under gorse bushes and nearly drowning. And his book about going underground, about the things that live there in a world we can't see. I just think he's superb, and he is kind of a one-man ecological revolution maker. He's raised a lot of consciousnesses. And a friend of his, if you haven't read her, Helen MacDonald, author of H is for Hawk, she's also at Cambridge. She is a superb writer, and that's a memoir I'll put up with. It's a book about grief, about losing her father, and she interweaves it with really the life of T.H. White and her own attempts to, well, you don't tame a falcon, but to become a falconer, to have a falcon, to know how to interact with a bird like that. It's wonderfully raw and just beautifully written, with an attention to the natural world that's just exquisite. She and Robert McFarlane I think they should rule whole countries. They don't want to, but I think they should. They'd be good at it.
wonderful. Somebody wants to know what you're working on, what you're writing about, if you've got a new book under.
Well, when this lockdown thingy happened, I thought, wow, I have all this time to write. All I'm going to do is sit around and write. And instead, I sit around and fret and obsess and look out the window and talk to the cat. So what I've been doing is journalism, because I'm kind of in a permanent bad mood. been doing probably too much journalism and I need to dial back. I am theoretically working on a book of essays about white women. I'm trying to figure out if that's still remotely relevant in this world. I suspect it is, because what got me going on this was thinking about white women voting for Trump. A majority of white women in America voted for Trump. Not a huge majority, but a majority. And I thought, A, what the hell is wrong with us? And B, I've always been interested in my kind that way. Why are we like this? What are we scared of? I'm really interested in what we're scared of, because there are a lot of answers to that. And then I started thinking about white women's folkways, which sounds odd because you think white women wouldn't have folkways. But Whitney and I know a whole bunch of folkways of white Southern women. I was thinking of some of my mother's rules, and this is class-based, of course, too. This is white middle-class women, but there are all kinds of rules about when you do something and when you don't, and what you wear and how you speak, and the kind of food you serve at a wedding, and the kind of, oh God, my mother told me there was even a way that used to be a rule of how a bride had to walk. Step, pause, step, pause. And I've always loved the Tallahassee May Party story. If y'all ever are, if you're not from here, you won't know what I'm talking about. But in Lewis Park downtown, you will note that there is a stump, a large stump of an oak tree, and most towns would have removed said stump, but that's a holy stump. That's the May oak, which stood there, I don't know how long. It finally died in, I think, 1986. And under the May oak was crowned the May Queen, who had no function whatsoever. If you've seen Midsummer, it's not that kind of May Queen. I just watched Midsummer again, and I'm still thinking about it. But the May Queen was just a high school girl that wore a white dress and sat under this tree in a big chair with a bunch of flowers, and little kids like me danced badly around a maypole, and we sang springy songs, and people came out and stared at us, and we ate little cakes, and then we all left. Nobody bought anything, nobody sold anything. But this is the kind of weird cultural ideal that was for so many years, and to some extent still is, pushed on us. And I suspect it's come around to bite us for the 8 millionth time. This ridiculous notion of women as somehow like flowers, just like flowers, wearing that hoop skirt. Hoop skirt's just like a flower. And if you don't know how to sit down in it, it'll whoop up over your head and you'll look very silly.
Well, we've got a few people are sharing books that they've read.
Good.
And they want to know your thoughts. Beach Music, Pat Conroy.
Haven't read it, I'm ashamed to say.
Running Against the Devil, Rick Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have been reading cookbooks and cocktail books for a change. I'm included there. I've been reading my cookbooks finally.
I love reading cookbooks. Very comforting. So comforting. I should read cocktail books too. Running Against the Devil, I'm about halfway through with, because I read 3 or 4 books at a go, and I have to put that one down sometimes because I get terrified. But Rick Wilson is hilarious. He is really, really funny. And he's mean as a snake, and that's a compliment. I mean that as a compliment. I love reading cookbooks with stories in them, and there are a lot of them. Or, well, another by my friend Bob Shakoch is Domesticity, which isn't exactly a cookbook. It's a book of cooking columns that are put together as a sort of memoir with food, and has great recipes. You can cook the recipes in there, but it's really the story of a marriage, and terrific food. I mean, his North Florida bouillabaisse is great, but I'm reading about food, not really cooking it, because I like to cook for other people. And, dinner parties are not on at the moment. So I'm just reading about it and eating a ham sandwich or something like that. So unexciting. I've been doing what apparently people call siege baking. I make cakes and give them away to people. And baking apparently is a thing people are doing because they're nervous. And I'm nervous, and I find baking soothes me, but I don't really want to eat it. I want to give it away. I want to be like, here's a banana cake. Take it. I love you.
That's awesome. Well, should we start wrapping up? Is there any final thoughts you want to impart to us, Diane?
Well, I was wondering if anybody had a final thought that was way better than any thought I've had, which wouldn't be that hard.
Oh, we had a couple more submissions. People are reading Samantha Irby's Wow, No Thank You.
I want to read that.
Is The Cooking Gene.
Mm-hmm.
And how is Hugo?
Well, he's crashed out on the other side of the laptop because there's a patch of sunlight. Sunlight cats love sunlight, and they just want to cook their fur. I could put the oven on low, get a basting thing, baste Hugo a little bit, put him in a roasting pan, and cook him, and he'd be fine. As long as it wasn't too hot, he'd be just fine. I've never seen animals in their rage to be warm so much. It's just bizarre. I have a rage to not be warm, but that cat wants to be warm. So you can see he and I are spending far too much time together. Far too much time.
Oh, well, we're lucky to have gotten to spend some time with you, Diane. So I'm going to tell everybody you can get all the books Diane talked about at Midtown Reader. I think that we have all of them except Moby Dick right now.
What?
100% sure. But you can get Moby Dick next week.
Gotta have Moby Dick.
Call. We're still delivering for free if you're in Tallahassee. We'll ship it to you if that's what you want. You can come pick it up at the store. We've got a safe, no contact pickup system worked out. So you can just, call us, go to our web store if you need any books. We got plenty of copies of Tribal too. This is a wonderful book if you enjoy Diane Roberts.
And y'all, let me just say, please support local businesses, support Midtown Reader, take out food from locally owned restaurants, buy gift cards, anything you can do. It's going to be hard enough to come out of this thing, and there will be so much that we have lost and so many things that we love that won't be here, but let's try to keep as much going as we can by, just spending some money if you can do it on the front end so that these things will be there when we get to crawl out of our quarantine caves.
Beautifully said. And I should say, one of our customers who listens to audiobooks through Libro FM just said they're really enjoying listening to it. If you want to listen to audiobooks, you can also support Midtown Reader, so it's on our website. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it.
This was fun. See you soon. Stay safe,
Thank you,
everybody.
Whitney. Y'all all stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye. To all of you, take care.